7-3, solving quadratics using square roots. Now, before I actually get into the lesson today, I want to remind you of something. When you're taking the square root of 9, that answer is 3 because 3 times 3 equals 9. So square root just means what number times itself gives you the number underneath the square root sign. But however, the square root of 9 is also equal to a negative 3 because negative 3 times negative 3 also equals a positive 9. So really, the square root of 9 is equal to a positive and a negative 3. Now, mathematicians use this plus or minus sign, which just means there's a positive and a negative, just so that they don't have to write it twice. Okay. So what we're actually doing today is going to be able to find the x-intercepts, the zeros, the roots, the solutions, by using the square root method. Now, this method is one that a lot of people prefer to use, but it doesn't work all the time. It only works if there's just one x in your problem. But here's what you're going to do. Step number 1, get the perfect square alone, and I'm talking about on one side of the equal sign. Step 2, take the square root of both sides, and then don't forget about the plus or minus sign. Then you can separate the plus or minus sign into two problems if necessary and solve for x. So example number 1. First thing I need to do is get that perfect square alone. So I'm talking about the letter being squared. Now I've got to get rid of a negative 121. The opposite would be to add it to each side. So plus 121 to each side of that problem. Whenever I do that, it's going to cancel out on the left and give me x is equal to a positive 121. And I'm sorry, x squared, because it still has the exponent 2 right there. Now after that, I've got the x squared by itself, so now I can take the square root of both sides. Now remember, the square root of x squared is x, because x times x gives me x squared, and the square root of 121 is a positive and a negative 11. So I'm going to write my answer just like that. Now in this problem, we're not going to have to do steps 3 and 4. That's going to come later. Okay. So example 2. I need to start by getting that x squared by itself. The negative 2 is attached to the letter, so that means that they're actually being multiplied together. So to get rid of it, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. That's going to cancel out on the left because negative 2 divided by a negative 2 is 1, and that leaves me with x squared is equal to. On that right side, I've got a negative 162 being divided by a negative 2. That gives me positive 81. Now that you have the x squared by itself, you can take the square root of both sides. This one's going to give me x, and the square root of 81 is a positive and a negative 9. Example 3. Draw on your equal sign. We're trying to get the x squared by itself. The opposite of a plus 49 is to subtract 49 from each side of the equal sign, which is going to cancel out on the left and still leaves you with the x squared, and 0 minus 49 on the right gives me a negative 49. Now for the next step, you need to take the square root of each side. But something different is going to happen on this problem. I know the square root of 49 is 7, but what's the square root of a negative 49? Okay, oops, square root of negative 49. I can do this. All right. That calculator says error because it's a non-real answer. Well, think about it for a second. A square root says what number times itself gives you that number. Well, if I do 7 times 7, that's a positive 49, so that's why that's not the answer. And if I do negative 7 and negative 7, that's also positive 49. The only way I could get a negative 49 is to multiply a negative 7 and a positive 7 together. But that's not a square root answer because they are not the exact same thing. So there's really no number that will actually multiply together by itself to give me a negative 49. So I want you to put no real solution. And that is going to happen to you any time that you have a negative sign underneath your square root symbol. All right. Example 4. Draw on your line. You're trying to get x squared by itself. Just to remind you, when you've got two numbers on the same side, you are the letter, your boyfriend or girlfriend is the one that's attached to you because you guys are attached at the hip, and your friend is on the same side as you but not attached to you. Now, guys, at the end of the day, you want to get rid of your friend before your boyfriend or girlfriend, otherwise you're going to make this guy mad. So let's go ahead and add 6 to each side of that equal sign. It is going to cancel out on the left, and I still have 4x squared is equal to 100. I added the 94 and the 6. The 4 is attached to the x squared, so in order to get rid of it, I've got to divide both sides by 4. 4 divided by 4 is a 1, so now I've got 1x squared is equal to 100 divided by 4 gives me 25. Now I do finally have that x squared by itself, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and that will give me x is equal to a positive and a negative 5. Just in case you're not sure, I want to show you how to find the square root button. If you look on your calculator, x squared right above it in blue is the square root symbol, so you press the second button and then you press the x squared, and that'll bring up a square root sign. Okay. Now at this point, please pause the video and allow everybody to work on the front side of the assignment. You'll have about 8 to 10 minutes to work on that, and then you will have to finish the notes. Okay. So, these next few problems are going to be a little bit different. Remember, you can only use the square root method whenever you only see one x. So in this problem, the first one up there, I only see the x written down once, so I could use the square root method. But look at the one underneath it. I see an x here and an x here, which means I cannot use the square root method. Now, in order to do the square root method, you have to get the perfect square by itself. Well, sometimes the perfect square is a set of parentheses. This whole thing is being squared, so that's the thing that I want to get alone. So that means on example 5, that part has been done for you. Now take the square root of both sides of the problem. That's going to leave me with x minus 3, because taking the square root of something squared just gets rid of that exponent. And this is equal to a positive and a negative 4. Don't forget about that plus or minus sign. Well, this is where we're going to have to add in that step 3. We need to separate the plus and the minus 4 into two separate problems. So I really have x minus 3 is equal to a positive 4 for the first one, or x minus 3 equals a negative 4 for the second one. So all I did, once again, take that set of parentheses, put it twice. I put positive 4 for one of them and negative 4 for the other. Now I've just got to do the one-step equation. The first one, I add the 3, which gives me x is equal to a positive 7. On the other one, I'm adding the 3 as well, which gives me x is equal to a negative 1. And you can use your calculator to be able to plug in those positive and negatives if you need to. If you're doing a negative 1, like over here, I would have typed in negative 4 plus 3, and that's how I got the negative 1. Number 6. All right. This one, I do have a set of parentheses being squared, so this is the thing that I want to get by itself. So in order to get it alone, I've got to get rid of everything that's on the outside of the parentheses. In this case, I'm talking about the 5. The 5 is being multiplied to the parentheses, so the way to get rid of it is to divide both sides of that equal side by 5. They will cancel out on the left, and now I've still got x minus 8 being squared equals. On the other side, I need to do 180 divided by 5, which ends up giving me positive 36. Now that I do have everything moved except anything on the inside of the parentheses, I can take the square root of both sides. Remember, all it does over here is get rid of that exponent, so now I just have x minus 8 equals, and the square root of 36 is going to give me a positive and a negative 6. Oops, I messed that up. All right. That is supposed to be a 6, so I'm sorry. Let me rewrite it in another color. Okay. So what you need to do now that you do have your set of parentheses, already taken the square root of it, we need to separate this problem. That means I've got x minus 8 is equal to a positive 6 for the first part, and x minus 8 is equal to a negative 6 for the other part. Now in order to finish solving on the first side, negative 8, the opposite of that is a positive 8, so I'm going to add it to each side, which will leave me with x is equal to 14. Or, on the other side, I'm also adding the 8. And if I have negative 6 plus 8, that one ends up giving me a positive 2. So x is equal to 14 or x is equal to 2. Okay. Number 7. This problem has a little bit more going on, but think of it as this thing being the variable. So this is you this time. So that makes the 3 attached to your hip. That's the boyfriend, girlfriend. The one that's not attached is your friend. So the first thing we need to do is get rid of your friend. It's a negative 2, so we've got to add 2 to each side of that equal sign. It cancels out on the left and gives you 3 times x plus 7 squared is equal to 75. Now I still have a number on the outside of the parentheses, this 3. It is attached, which means it's multiplied, so let's divide to get rid of it. That's going to give me x plus 7 squared is equal to 25. Now on the left side, all I have is my parentheses being squared, so I need to take the square root of each side of the problem. This thing is going to get rid of the exponent, and now I've just got x plus 7 is equal to a positive and a negative 5. Now I'm running out of a little bit of space here, so I'm going to work over on the side. I'm going to separate this problem as x plus 7 equals positive 5, or x plus 7 equals a negative 5. Right. So in order to get rid of the plus 7, we are going to subtract 7 from each side of that equal sign, and that gives me x is equal to a negative 2. On the other side, I'm also subtracting 7. And if you need to type this one into your calculator, you've got to be careful how you actually type it in. You're going to type in the negative 5 right here, so negative 5 minus 7. Remember, when it's the very beginning of your problem, you use a negative sign. If it's in between two numbers, you're going to use a minus sign. So those two, I hit enter. That gives me negative 12. So my two answers are negative 2 and negative 12. Last example. All right, the set of parentheses is what you're trying to get alone. So that makes the positive 1 the friend. So let's subtract 1 from each side, and that will cancel out. I still have 7 times x minus 2 squared is equal to 567 now. I did subtract the 1. The 7 is outside of the parentheses, so I've got to get rid of it by dividing first. It's going to cancel on the left, and I still have that x minus 2 squared equals. The other side, I need to do 567 divided by 7, and that gives me positive 81. Okay. Now that I do have that set of parentheses by itself, I can take the square root of each side, and that'll give me x minus 2 is equal to a positive and a negative 9. You've taken the square root, so now let's go over to the side. I'm going to break the problem apart. So x minus 2 either equals a positive 9 or x minus 2 equals a negative 9. Okay. In order to finish solving this one, I've got to get rid of the negative 2. I'm going to add it to each side. 9 plus 2 gives me 11, so that's my first x-intercept. The other one, I add the 2 to each side of that equal sign, and that will give me x is equal to a negative 7. So my x-intercepts are 11 and negative 7.